Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 42 of Stepping Wild. Thibaut of Arteron, the older man said, walking around Tibs. You have certainly made arranging this meeting interesting. That was never my intention. Tib's intention had been to ensure it never happened. Losing the tails had been simple enough. He'd expected to manage it until he was done and had moved on to another city. Unfortunately, he'd come across Aldero in a crowd of, you know what, he's always been referring it, the guard. Keeps referring to him as Aldero the guard, so I'm going to keep doing that. He'd come across Aldero the guard in a crowded marketplace and froze. He hadn't visited his house for a few days, since the coins he left there the last time would see them through until the next guard's payday, and walking had still been difficult for the man. Even now, the guard leaned against the wall, attempting to look casual, but his skin was clammy, which might have been caused by noticing his attacker. Tibs tried to decide what to do in that instant of locked eyes. Go apologize for what he'd done, explain how ultimately it was the guard's own fault for trying to beat a poor street thief just attempting to survive, beg forgiveness. Tell him he was the one who helped him survive these weeks, that he'd made amends enough and owed the men nothing. He'd turn away, deciding that nothing he could say would help anyone, and had walked into his tail. The older man smirked. I have no doubt you didn't want this to happen, but you kept picking pockets after you were warned. You entered a house uninvited by its owner or me. As you see, nothing in my city escapes my notice. Tib shrugged. He figured that if that were true, the man would be angry about the team he was building, or the fact there had been more than one house. I stayed out of the gang's neighborhood. Made sure there were no gangs in the neighborhoods I picked pockets from. I figured that in a city this large, there are enough for everyone to enjoy. Now that the meeting was taking place, he didn't want to antagonize the man referred to as the master, but he had no intention of being cowed by a title or acting like he was. As for the house, I didn't think anyone in this part of the city cared what happens to the nobles, no matter how low they are. The man's demeanor and appearance made Tibs confident he was from the street. The wariness in the eyes, the glancing about for threats, even with as powerful as he was. It had taken Tibs years to shed those reflexes, so he could act like someone of higher standing. The man's confidence was born of someone who had clawed his way to his position, not conned himself there. The man eyed him severely. There is a balance to this city. You'd know that if you'd bother coming to me before you went about upsetting people. Nobles, Tibs corrected. And some of my people, he replied severely. Again, Tibs shrugged. I'll be more careful of those pockets, of whose pocket I put my fingers into next time. No, you will not steal from anyone. The man locked eyes with Tib. If you want to work in my city, you'll do so with the crew I assign to you. The snort was unbidden, but not unwelcome. I don't work with someone else's crew. If I need one, I'll make my own. I'm sure there's a neighborhood you don't have a gang in and we can settle in. No. The word was sharp. I decide who works where, and that determines whose crew you are on. What if you're too late? Tibbs asked casually, both to annoy the man and test if the lack of earlier comment had been intentional. What if I already have a crew? The man snorted. I'd know if you'd approached anyone. No lights on the words. It meant Tibbs had succeeded in keeping away from anyone who had his description. It could last, but he only had one teammate left to recruit. Considering how much of a threat the master was to this one too, did be discreet, but it meant he'd have to be more careful in approaching anyone he needed specifically to make him what if anyone who did make him what he needed to enter the library. There was nothing boastful about the man's intention to keep track of Tibs. Look, he made the tone conciliatory. I'm only here for a few weeks. I'm not settling. I have a very specific target. I make them pay, then I'm gone. I doubt you'll care what trouble befalls them. Befalls who? The man demanded. You'll know once I'm done. I've been planning for too long to risk her finding out. The man got into Tibbs' space. You aren't doing anything until I know who you're going after. Tibbs motioned to the others in the room. You know that's a bad idea. Okay. Until you tell me. Who you're going after. Tibbs motioned to the others in the room. You know that's a bad idea. They'd kept to the wall, but the man's enforcer couldn't be ignored. I trust them with my life. Tibbs smiled. But do you trust them with your secrets? Of course. The words were bright, but caused a few of the enforcers to straighten with pride. Good for you. Making the words mocking came easily. I've been betrayed too often by those I trusted, those proclaiming they were mine, those whose best interest I kept in mind. He made the smile nasty. Nasty. Never again. Then be warned, Thibault of Abertaron. Act against my orders, and there will be consequences. Not going to be any trouble to you. He threw his arm up in an act of frustration. All I want is for her to pay for... He snapped his mouth shut, as if only now noticing the man's hungry interest. Quickly covered the worry with determination and glared at the man, whose expression turned gentle. And all I want is... And I want to help you. The man replied, the glowing words as gentle. That's my role here, to see to it that everyone under my care gets what they're after. But I need to know what that is so I can mitigate the fallout. He waited, expression patient, but Tibbs remained defiantly silent. Then I can't help you. I'm sorry. The last two words glowed brighter than the previous ones. You don't understand, he said through gritted teeth and anger. Through gritted teeth. Oh, through teeth gritted in anger. I do. This time there was no light on the gentle word. You aren't the only one who's been betrayed. But that doesn't mean I can't let you endanger my people. If you won't let me help you, I can't let you act. It is that simple of a choice. Tibbs glared, and the man locked his gentle gaze with him. Tibbs looked away angrily. Fine, he snapped. Then I'll just follow her when she leaves this abyss-cursed city. He turned and headed for the door. The man on each side stepped to keep him from reaching it. He glared, but stopped out of sword reach. Remember my warning, Thibault. In my city, you steal only if I allow it. I heard you, he growled. Now tell them to get out of my way so I can find a tavern with decent beer. The silence stretched. He sensed the old man move, then the two thugs stepped aside. He left, stumping well after most of the people the old man sent to follow him left. He left still. Stumping well after most of the people the old man sent to follow him were gone. He found a tavern and drank enough bad-tasting beer to explain his stumbling away in the lone tale he had left, and made his way to the room Thibault had paid for. When he dropped into the bed, it was with a grin. The darkness etching Tibbs maintained around him ensured he stepped unnoticed among the well-dressed people attending the large gathering. The gathering had something to do with convincing the king to lessen the tariffs on some alcohol from a kingdom they were at odds with. Tibbs had no interest in that. But to have any hopes of convincing the king meant going through their agents of commerce. That meant pooling enough money so one of them saw things the merchant's way. The noble behind the meeting was also of interest to him. Lord Rastmere of Kenterion wasn't the highest of the city's noble. Tibbs listening had told him not even close to that. But he had aspirations. His family was important in Kenterion, and he planned on making it so here too. That meant he was prone to making his display larger than needed to be, such as displaying all the coins, bars, and promises on a table for all to see, and to shame those who hadn't given as much as their fellow. Talk of a plan was what had put Tibbs of that plan was what had put Tibbs on the man, and onto this on to the on making this Fleet Fingers' next public display of disruption. All that money made him wish he still had his old armor, with the hidden pouch that could take in so much more than its size led to believe. With it, he could take all of it. There was enough here that, even after distributing most to those who needed it, he'd have enough to pay for all he needed to enter the university and do his research. Without that, all he had was a lone bag to fill with the coins, so he wouldn't have much left to dedicate to that. He couldn't hand bars or promises to the people in need, and no one would be willing to convert them after news of this theft spread. At least not without also alerting the master, who wouldn't be pleased. They wanted him hangry, but didn't need to make it easy on the man when it came to locating the culprit. But this wasn't for him. It was for the city's unfortunate, and to put on a performance that would make people talk about Fleet Fingers. He disrupted the light's essence from the stones suspended from the ceiling in what he expected was meant to be an attractive display on top of providing illumination. The flicker caused people to look up and around, away from the table. He plunged the room into darkness and used metal essence to pull the coins in the bag. He slipped a promise into his jerkin as he jumped onto the table, heavy bag over his shoulder. He let the light return. The merchants and nobles looked around, and Tibbs cleared his throat. "Wealthy of Brokenthia," he proclaimed, only his smile exposed by the mask. "I thank you, and the one day great Lord Rastmire, for this oh so welcoming table you arranged for me." He looked at the wealth at his feet. "You shouldn't have. I mean it. Fleet Fingers doesn't deserve such generosity." He bounced the bag against his back, making the coins clink together. But what kind of guest would he be if he turned down such a gift? "Guards!" someone finally yelled. "Get that thief!" "Now," he said, his tone offended, while the guards overcame their surprise. "There's no need to be hurtful. Fleetfingers is no lowly thief. He's a facilitator of currency movement." He smiled as the guard pushed the wealthy out of their way to reach him. And now it seems he must leave. He jumped, an air etching under his feet, letting him clear the first guard to reach the table as well as the others, and landed in the still vacant space behind him. He couldn't be too obvious about his use of essence, but Flintfingers was a character out of a bard's song, so he needed to push things somewhat. The first was a metal etching throughout the coin to make them light enough they didn't rip the bag open as he landed, and made his escape something no bard would need to exaggerate in the telling. He slipped past the guard, an etching of water causing the attempted grab to slide over his arm. He used the act to explain the spin that led to him facing a woman with a surprisingly large chest when he stopped it. I hope you don't mind, he said, beaming, taking the colorful brooch from her neckline. Red isn't your color. Although it suits that angry blush nicely. Gemmed brooch in hand, Tibs ran for the door, ducking under the noble's clumsy attempt to grab him. Then under the two guards who vacated their post by the door to rush him with an etching of water on his knees and lower leg to let him slide on the floor. He stood and turned, unlocking the door they had been smart enough to lock before trying to stop him. This has been a most wonderful affair. I promise to praise those who arranged it as I spend these newly acquired coins. Do not hesitate to invite. Da, 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 da. Fleet Fingers promises to praise those who arranged it as he spends these newly acquired coins. Do not hesitate to invite him to more such gathering. He gave a bow, stepping aside the guard who tried to grab him, pulled the door open to a surprise call and someone proclaiming they had locked it, and ran down the corridor. Bells rang, and before he made it halfway to the door leading outside the building, men and women burst out of a room close to said door. They were rougher looking than the guards, a mix of nobles and merchants' personal guards, he expected. They covered the distance faster than you know what? He doesn't. I don't need this here. He covered the distance faster than he expected, but easily dealt with that by placing a foot on the wooden wall and etching to ensure it had traction, and pushed himself up and forward. He did the same when his foot landed on the other wall, and in this manner, with a hand on the ceiling to keep his head from hitting it, he walked over the guards. He returned to the floor once behind them and paused before the door, turning to smile as they untangled themselves of the mess, trying to turn while others ran into them at caused. While brief, Fleet Fingers thank you for the added exercise. Be sure to let your masters know of your valiant attempt. I have no doubt they will be impressed. He shouldered the door open and quickly lost himself among the alleys and then the roof. Tibs got up to the last member of his team exactly in the situation he expected to find him, cornered at the end of an alley by four thugs. Now, fellows, the muscular man said, hand over up placatingly, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. There's no need for this to turn violent, is there? The man's clothing had seen better days, an entire lifetime ago, possibly. His hide pants were cut, ripped, and bloodied in so many places, Tibs had no idea how he hadn't found something better to replace them with. The shirt was more threads holding pieces of fabric together. The only thing keeping Tibs from stepping in was the grin on his future teammate's face. You've been warned to stay out of fights, the woman said. Which fight? You should be able to tell I've been in a lot of them. The one you were told to stay out of. She rushed him, bringing the club down. He barely moved as he raised a hand and deflected the strike to the side. He then kneed her in the stomach. Look, I really don't want to. He ducked under a man's punch and struck him in the chest twice with an open palm, causing his attacker to stagger back. Surely we can be reasonable about this? He looked at the arms that were now wrapped around his chest. Really? He slammed his head back into the woman's face and she let go, and going to her bleeding nose. I really don't want to fight. The words were so bright. Not that anyone seeing that grin would believe him. How about I just get him? The first woman yelled, getting to her feet. The four thugs, Tibbs had sensed lying in wait in the alleys, stepped out of them. The grin faltered. Okay, this is going to be interesting. Instead of raising his fist, he altered how he stood. Tibbs stepped out of his alley and walked. You know what? Lumbered toward the fight. He couldn't afford to let him get too injured. And he'd seen enough to confirm the stories he'd heard. Okay, you know what? This is... I indicate that he's watched him fight. Okay, it's enough to confirm. The unusual way. And it's in enough to confirm the unusual way he fought was effective in more than arranged fights. He was ready to make his offer. He grabbed the thug's arm before he brought the club down on the distracted fighter. What? He turned to face Tibs. Who? Tibbs slammed an earth-reinforced fist. And being first person, this is the thing is I don't know. Because I would rather have, okay, because right now I have the way Tibbs is dressed as a bit of a surprise, but I don't really want that. I just don't know how to. Okay, early. Okay, this. Oh, number. All right, this is not fast. Hopefully, this is going to be enough to hint. He wasn't worried about displaying more strength than usual. He had to match how he looked with the larger armor filled with. Okay, I did it there. Okay. Uh, you have to match how he looked. The earth, oh, filling the armor kept it from flopping about as he moved. His hair was bunched in the helmet, with the face placed down, letting them only see his brown eyes and soot-covered beard. He grabbed another thug and threw her into the wall. He let the club hit him in the side of the head and took a staggering step to the side. He shook it as if to clear it, but had his arm up in time to block the club. He punched the thug in the face hard enough. He was more interested in holding it than attacking again. He turned in time to watch his future teammates send the last of his opponent to the ground by tripping her over the leg he'd placed behind her and shoving hard. He wasn't sure how that had come about, but she didn't get up. The fighter looked at Tibs and smiled. I definitely appreciate the help, but you might have gotten yourself involved in something you shouldn't have. These people aren't going to like anyone who helps me. He shrugged. The fighter offered his hand. Seeing how you saved me a lot of pain, I'm Charlie. Tibbs looked at the groaning thugs on the ground, two of which glared at him hatefully. He deepened his voice. I'm the brute. Charlie grinned. You certainly are. How about we get out of here before enough of them can stand and have another go at us? He didn't wait for Tibbs' answer before heading out of the alley. And that concludes chapter 42 of Stepping Wild. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter will be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read this story, it is available on Ream Story. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. Links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.